All right. Well, hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. The legislative session ended a few hours early, but just a few days ago on Friday. We're glad that you could be with us today to talk about what happened and how Next Missouri worked over the last few months to advance a number of different policy priorities to help entrepreneurs and to spur innovation in Missouri. So let's go ahead and jump right in. I want to start today by introducing the Next Missouri team. My name is Jason Weens. I've been working for the past, I don't know, year and a half, or not quite year and a half, that's too long, 8 months with Next Missouri in a role helping to manage and lead the coalition's activities. Joining us also from the Next Missouri team is Ben Johnson, based in St. Louis. Grace Riley in the middle of the state. Our other colleague, Sarah Schlemeyer-Hinke, is on the last days of her maternity leave, so she won't be with us today, but she's a key part of this Next Missouri team. And then we'll hear in a few minutes from Noel Torpy, who's one of our lobbyists who works in Jefferson City and has had an inside look at what has been and hasn't been happening in the Capitol during this 2024 legislative session. At any point today during our call, if you have any questions, comments, things that you'd like to add, there are two ways in which I encourage you to do so. You can use the raise hand function. Grace, maybe if you could help me look for hands, we'll try and see those and call on you to ask your question or to provide some input. You can also use the chat as a way to ask questions and to share thoughts. I'll keep an eye on that as we go today. So I want to invite Noel to come on and give us kind of an overview of some of the big issues and debates that shaped this year's session. Noel, after you're finished, I'll come back on. I'll talk through the policy priorities that Next Missouri was working on this year. And then we'll conclude with some ways in which you guys can get involved as we start looking ahead to 2025. So Noel, let me turn it over to you, please.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Sorry, I was having some technical issues, so I called in. So this year in the Missouri General Assembly, it was the longest session you can constitutionally have, and next year will be the shortest. So, you know, the House functioned normally. You know, it ended up kind of saving session. There were over 2,500 bills that passed, and only non-budgetary bills, 28 got across the finish line into the governor's desk, which is even really low for the Missouri General Assembly. It's unfortunate, but there were a couple big issues. There was a big education reform bill. You know, in Missouri, we were ranked 50th in a teacher salary, and a state like Arkansas, starting salary is $50,000. So we're trying to be competitive there. It's going to bump it up to over $40,000 and hope to keep, you know, graduates from Missouri in the state of Missouri. I think it'll be beneficial. There was an expansion of charter schools within that in Boone County, so there was some controversy there, but I think the money ultimately will outweigh some of the education reform stuff and keeping our educators in Missouri. So I thought overall that may end up being a really good piece of legislation. IP reform, which is initiative petition, that did not pass, that failed. That's really what hung up the 51-hour filibuster by the Democrats. And earlier in session, in February, they let it go. It passed the Senate and went to the House. And unfortunately, the sponsor of the bill, Elizabeth Coleman, during a House hearing publicly said, "Oh, don't worry about it. Put everything back the way I filed the bill, and we'll PQ, previous question, the Democrats." Well, that set the Senate kind of on fire for the rest of session. And so what ended up happening is they call it ballot candy. So they put language in the initiative petition to push people to go out and vote. And one of those things in there, the language was illegal immigrants no longer can vote in Missouri. It was worded something like that. Well, non-Missouri residents haven't voted in Missouri since 1924. And so that's why they call it ballot candy. It's just kind of to push people out, and somewhat very deceptive to voters in November. And that's what the Democrats were upset about. They would have, if they took all the ballot candy out, they would have sat down. They would have voted no on initiative petition, but they would have sat down and let it pass. And so after 51 hours, Republicans kind of gave up hope, regular Republicans. But the Freedom Caucus Senate members, now that the Freedom Caucus in the House, you can actually deal with them and talk to them and, compromise. But in the Senate, because the leader of that Freedom Caucus is running statewide, he wanted the chaos, I believe, and wanted, initiative petitions not even in the Missouri Republican platform. There's some other stuff in there, but it's not even in that. And for whatever reason, they kind of grabbed onto that issue, I think in large part knowing it'd be very difficult to pass, so they would be able to create all kinds of chaos. And so that they went back and forth on that. It was unfortunate. It ended up killing a lot of legislation. But for the House, they were still able to pass 28 bills. But if it wasn't for the House, it would have passed, I think, 12 or 13. But unfortunately, for the third straight year, that the House members were the adults in the room and passed some really big stuff like, FRA, Federal Reimbursement Allowance, which is a big deal to hospitals, and especially in rural Missouri. They allowed a bill that we cared greatly about, the regulatory sandbox bill. They passed that late. Business incentives, investment incentives, they passed that, which I think will be really good. It is so frustrating being down there and allowing, 3 or 4 senators to just kind of dictate everything. And, come August 6th, with primaries and lots of different people running statewide, we truly will have a very different General Assembly come January. And hopefully, in large part, a lot of the chaos folks will be gone, and we'll get back to actually functioning like we were 4 or 5 years ago. It does give me great hope that come next January, we'll actually be functioning and able to do, some good things. But, another good bill that passed, 1803, that allows, the Treasurer's Office to raise the cap on small business loans. I mean, there were some really good things that passed. Unfortunately, in the media, they talk about all the negative stuff and chaos, and we were able to pass a budget. I mean, not ideal budget, but we didn't have to go into special to do it, which is wonderful. Still not sure what the governor does, because in Missouri, the governor has line item veto power. And so he may veto a lot of the stuff in the budget that wasn't in his recommendations. And he was not happy that the House kind of wrote the budget for the first time in about 4 years. The last few years, the Senate has written a large chunk of that budget. And so, the governor, I could see the governor vetoing some of the recommendations from the House, even though the chairman of the budget, Cody Smith, gutted a lot of the governor's budget, and so there's friction there. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens there if the governor ultimately vetoes a bunch. And then, the key dates on that for the governor to sign budget bills is June 30th, so that's not that far away. And then on non-budget bills, it's July 14th. And then we have veto session September 11th, so that gives the General Assembly an opportunity to override the governor. They've never overridden the governor of the same party. When Jay Nixon was in, they overrode him quite a few times. So it'll be interesting to see with the Governor Parsons being done in January if they try to override him. But that's a little too early for that. But that's kind of, the overview of the General Assembly. even though there was a tremendous amount of dysfunction because people were running statewide and for higher offices and reelection because of term limits in large part, there were some really good things that got done, especially for small businesses. So I think that should be the takeaway, that small businesses did pretty well in a year of great dysfunction. Jason, am I missing anything?
No, I appreciate that overview. And I think, like anything, right, it's often not black or white, and there is a mixed bag, right? There were some good things which we'll talk about that did get accomplished this year. Also some challenges. I think you mentioned, Noel, that this year just over 2,600 bills were introduced, but only 28 policy bills were passed. That's only about 1% of all bills that were introduced. Typically, that number is closer to 5%. So when you see this quote from the Springfield News Leader about least productive session in recent memory, that's some context for why that is the case. So I'm going to talk now about the two key priorities that Next Missouri was working on this year. If you've been following along with us during this legislative session, these will be issues that are familiar to you. And as I think we all know, if we are working with entrepreneurs and small businesses, access to capital is the #1 barrier for small startups flourishing in the state. And so to catalyze investment in new Missouri businesses, Next Missouri led the effort this year to create an angel investor tax credit to stimulate investment in new businesses. We got to work on this issue in 2023 by identifying sponsors before the 2024 legislative session. We had our bills pre-filed, which is a real critical step in moving legislation through the assembly. The sessions only last 20 weeks, I think, as Noel said. So having that early head start is critical. We were there right out the gate with the bills to create this tax credit. We had hearings in both the House and the Senate early in the session. Those were favorable, in which we heard, key legislators express support for the bill. We also had other organizations from across the state testify in support of this policy proposal. So we were kind of moving along as the session got started. Both the House and the Senate committees that the bill was referred to approved it. And then unfortunately, we hit a wall after spring break. And so in addition to some of the larger dynamics that were at play this year, which you heard Noel talk about, there was also strong opposition from at least one Republican senator this year to any new tax credits. And so the tax credit was the mechanism by which this bill would create this incentive for people to invest in new businesses. And so that proved to, unfortunately, be a particular hangup that we weren't able to overcome. And while that was disappointing, obviously, we are still, I think at this point, nevertheless encouraged that there was support for the substance of the bill and a recognition among many legislators that helping entrepreneurs get capital is a worthy objective. And so as we think about, our prospects for next year, we're planning to continue to advocate for this issue in 2025. We feel pretty good, both because of the support that we did hear expressed in the legislature and because some of these issues related to tax credits and some of the dynamics that Noel alluded to and described are likely, we think, to be less of a factor in 2025. I also would be remiss if I didn't say thank you to all of our Next Missouri members and advocates who, throughout this session, as we issued calls to action and let you know that, hey, the committees are going to consider this bill, they're going to vote on it. It's important that legislators hear from their constituents about why this issue matters. Many of you responded to those calls to action and weighed in with your legislators. And so thank you for doing so. That kind of activity from advocates across the state is really important. So I thank you again for doing that. The other key priority that we were working on this year, and this has been a longstanding issue for Next Missouri, is to encourage the legislature to support the Missouri Technology Corporation. One of MTC's important functions is the financial support that it provides 2 local entities that are working with and assisting entrepreneurs and small business owners across the state. This year, we supported the governor's request of $16 million in funding for MTC, which included $8.5 million in core funding, plus continuation of a funding boost that MTC had received the previous year. This year, the legislature accepted the governor's request of $8.5 million in core funding, but unfortunately, not that additional amount. And this again is kind of a dynamic that we saw play across a number of different issues. So across the state budget, this year the 2025 budget is $1.2 billion less than the 2024 budget and $3 billion less than what the governor proposed. So a number of different programs across the state didn't receive the funding levels that they did last year, and certainly below what the governor had requested. But there's also, you heard from Noel, a few other pieces of good news, things that we're able to cross the finish line that are helpful to entrepreneurs and to small businesses across the state. So 2 of the 28 policy bills that passed this year were things that Next Missouri supported. One of those is expansion of the MoBucks program. If you're not familiar with MoBucks, it's what they call a linked deposit program. So essentially, state dollars are deposited into local banks across Missouri, and banks then use those funds to provide low interest loans to small businesses. So this is helping small businesses across Missouri get that kind of capital, right, that they need to grow and develop. Governor Parsons signed HB 1803 earlier this month, and that's the bill that increases the amount that the treasurer can invest in the MoBucks program by $400 million. You also heard from Noel that on the very last day of session, the House passed SB 894, the Regulatory Sandbox Right to Start Act. So this bill does 2 really key things. One, it establishes a system to temporarily grant regulatory relief for the offering of an innovative product or service. So helping entrepreneurs test their ideas in the real market and get feedback on those new ideas and products. It also creates an Office of Entrepreneurship within state government that will help coordinate and strengthen state policy to help entrepreneurs start and grow their businesses. I'll pause for a second and just say, if there are any questions that anyone has, feel free. We'd love to hear your feedback and have you contribute to our conversation today as well. You can raise your hand or put your question in the chat. So I know we're just, what is today, Tuesday, 4 days out from the close of the 2024 legislative session. But we're already starting to think about next year and 2025. One of the ways in which we would love for you all to get involved is to take a really short survey that we developed. You can scan the QR code on your screen. That'll take you to the survey. And this will help, your feedback will help us begin to start shaping the legislative, the policy agenda that we will pursue in 2025. And there will be other opportunities between now and the end of the year where you can get involved and to help, share your ideas about what are those key challenges, issues, barriers, opportunities where we need the legislature and the state to get involved to help reduce barriers and expand access to entrepreneurship so that all Missourians, wherever they live in the state, are able to take their ideas and turn it in to new and successful businesses. If anyone who's on our call today, and again, thank you for joining, is not subscribed to Next Missouri, we offer a monthly newsletter, as well as we will connect with you throughout the year when there are kind of key updates or opportunities for you to get involved. If you want to sign up for the newsletter, it's super easy to do so. You can just take out your phone, text the word NextMo to the number 52886, and you'll get a text back that'll take you to the webpage where you can give us your email address and sign up for our newsletters. We try not to spam you, but also try and make sure that you're staying informed about key issues that are happening in the state. And thanks, Grace. She made it even easier. There's the link in the chat box if you want to sign up. I would also love to connect with anyone who's interested in, one-on-one conversation about key policy issues that are affecting entrepreneurs, innovation, and small businesses in the state. If there are questions you and your organization have about how you might get more involved with Next Missouri, things that you think we as an organization and a coalition need to be focused on that maybe haven't been on the radar yet, send me an email. My email is jason@risepolicy.com, and I would love to find time to get together on Zoom or phone, or if you're in the Kansas City area, even in person over coffee, to chat about the things that matter to you and find out how we can work more closely together. So that's the content that we had for you guys today. You have been an attentive audience. I'll give one last opportunity. If there are any questions or thoughts that others would like to share, happy to have that conversation now before I let you get back to your day.
Jason, can you hear me? This is Izzy.
Yeah, hi Izzy.
Hey, question for you. Are you seeing unused ARPA dollars at the state level? I know there are some allocations at the federal level, and I've seen it also at the city level where the allocations are potentially being returned due to the organizations that have capacity, or for one reason or another certain programs may not have happened. So I was wondering if that's something that you're seeing at the state level as well, and if so, that might be an opportunity for us to procure additional revenues since their deeds are kind of coming up on this.
Izzy, thank you for joining and for asking that question. The audio was a bit in and out for me, but I think the question, what you were asking is, are we seeing instances where funds are being returned to the state? Is that correct, Izzy? Because the entities didn't have the kind of capacity to implement fully on the programs that they were funded for?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Or might be, because I know not all of them have done their reporting yet, but potentially some of them might have already communicated to departments that they're not going to be using all of their ARPA funds due to capacity shortfalls.
Yeah. That's a great question. I personally have not heard of that. Noel, I don't know if you're still on the phone, or Grace, if you, in the work that you're doing with
Jason, this is Ben.
Yeah.
And Grace or Noel weigh in as well. Great question. As Ben Johnson of BioSTL Next Missouri here. The last I had that conversation was about a month and a half, maybe 2 months ago. And at that point, there was speculation it could happen, but it had not yet. Kind of to your point, like, had they notified anybody that they might not use it? There was speculation that there could be some cases. Not on this specific topic, but I actually have a lunch meeting later today with somebody who was, I last talked about this, who was involved in creating some of the ARPA structures for the state. I do think that's an interesting question, and the nature of that, my prior conversation with them had been exactly as I think where your mind is going, is if some of those dollars are recycling back, might there be a way to capture them into the kinds of priorities that we share on behalf of new businesses? So I appreciate you raising the question, because candidly, that wasn't on my mind for the agenda of my lunch. It's on a different topic, but I will now raise it, and I'll make sure we hopefully, particularly if there's any positive news, circle back with the group. So good question.
Yeah, thanks, Ezzy, and I appreciate that insight, Ben, that you were able to share. I think certainly, right, if there are opportunities where dollars were allocated and haven't been used, can they be repurposed to support this kind of entrepreneurship-driven economic development? That would be a good thing, I think, from all of our perspectives, and certainly something that should benefit the state. So thanks for raising it. Other thoughts or questions?
I was just curious about SSBCI, the competitive grant, and if I don't think MTC went for it, but I was just curious if there was any activity that had gone around that.
Yeah, Miles, thanks for being with us and for asking that question. I think we have a few folks from MTC that are on the call. I don't know if anyone wants to speak to that question from MTC directly.
Yeah, Jason, I can take that question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, thanks,
Yeah.
Jack. Good to see you.
So Miles, two things to point out. MTC is currently working on identifying an operator for the $3 million in technical assistance grant funding that has been awarded to the state. So because we are still working on that, no, we as an organization did not submit what I believe you're referring to, which was that they've opened up a competitive process that individual organizations instead of states can apply for. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Perfect. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Jack. Other thoughts, questions? If something does pop in your mind after we get off the call today, please, again, don't hesitate to reach out. If I don't know the answer directly myself, I will find it for you and get you connected to the resources that you need. Again, my email is on the screen there. Appreciate everyone's time today. Thanks for joining. Thanks for caring about these issues. We look forward to finding more ways in which we can work together in the months ahead as we prepare already for 2025 to make sure that the state policy, the government here in Missouri is, doing everything that it needs to be to supporting entrepreneurship and helping our state's economy grow and prosper. So we look forward to those opportunities with you. Thanks again, and hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you, everyone.